Welcome to another episode of the Alma Ensemble Summer Interview Series. We've got Sarah Wardle-Jones with us.
Hello.
And Erica Sipes.
Hello.
Who had a recital today, killing it. And I'm Michelle Smith-Johnson, and we are the co-founders of the Alma Ensemble, a chamber music collective based in Roanoke, Virginia. So coming to us today, I can't even believe it, that this is real. From Melbourne, Australia, we're beyond excited to have the award-winning composer extraordinaire, Katy Abbott. Welcome, Katy. How are you?
I'm really well. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me, and it's so great to meet you over Zoom.
Absolutely. I'm glad we're having this opportunity as well.
So our first question for you is this. We want to know about how your career has unfolded, because you have such, your music is performed by performers all over the world, like us. We love your piece. But how have you gotten to this point?
Oh, that's such a good question. My story is that although I was a really musical kid and I learned different instruments, I didn't really start music till after I left school. So I was in the school choir. I did a bit of violin, a bit of piano. I did year 12 drum kit. So I had music, but I didn't follow it. I didn't take it for a year, the year 11 and 12 subjects at school. And when I left school, I started nursing because I didn't know what else I wanted to do. I was a very, very shy kid who was the kid who looked out the window and was just sort of off in my own little world. So really I started composing about the age of 27, 28, around then, and I was already married. I didn't have children at that point. And I went to the World Choral Symposium, which is held every 4 years. And this particular time it was in Sydney, Australia, and my work allowed me to go because I thought I'll get some choral conducting experience because I was doing some music teaching, but certainly not composing. And I found myself at all the composing seminars and workshops, and I just was hooked. And I went home and said to my husband, oh my goodness, I think I'm a composer. I would like to try this. And my parents said, really? Yeah, you want to try this, but you've got a job. And anyway, I started a graduate diploma at Melbourne Uni, and then I went on to do a master's and a PhD there studying with Brenton Broadstock, which was a fantastic experience. And during my PhD, which was really my training ground, I had my twins, and then I had another baby just before I submitted. And the twins actually just had their 17th birthday this last weekend.
Aww.
So my children have grown up with my career. So I suppose it began, I call it an inkling, just a little feeling that maybe I could be a person who writes music. And then as I started to write music, and I felt extremely vulnerable going into a classical music institution with very little classical music background or technique, I suppose if I had an instrument, it would have been voice, pop, jazz, writing my own silly little pop songs on the piano, but nothing that I would ever show anybody. Or so my voice is okay, but it's not fantastic. So I was never going to go anywhere with that, even if I'd wanted to, which I wouldn't have had the confidence to do that at that point. So as I wrote music, people liked it, and so I wrote more music and people played it, and then people started asking for music, and I suppose it's just snowballed from there.
That's incredible.
I really like my story because it gives other people confidence that you don't have to start when you're 4 years old, that it's never too late,
Absolutely. And that resonates sort of with us because each of us, we studied music through school. It's a little bit different. But then, like, for example, when I got out of grad school, it was 2008, 2009 at the pit of the recession. So I went into teaching, and that was not, my ultimate goal, but then I ended up falling in love with it. So my teaching self sort of meandered, sort of like you were talking about, and then I missed playing. And so
Oh,
Sarah did a concert that inspired me to start playing together. And then this whole thing sort of snowballed, like you said, on itself, later, sort of in our, I don't know, mid 30s or so. So it's cool.
yeah, it is cool. I like the meandering story because I think it
Yeah.
speaks of I don't know, I like the idea of following my nose and just seeing what happens. And, all I wanted to do, I thought, wow, maybe one day I'll write a symphony and that would be amazing. And I did that in 2004.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Congratulations.
and so
Beautiful.
everything past this is a bonus. I go, wow, oh, I can do this. And I wonder what happens if I try this. And maybe, oh, these people want to play my music. And it's built collaborations that I'm so happy to have. Even this connection, even though I missed meeting you last year, it's nice that we can meet in this context.
Right. Agreed. Agreed. So we discovered your work through your album, Sunburnt Aftertones. So, and it included a work that we've performed several times now entitled Making Angels and you wrote that for our particular ensemble or our instrumental ensemble, flute, clarinet, and piano. And we've done it, four times, maybe three or four times. And we've just fallen in love with it. And whenever we're programming a concert, I always want to go back to it. I'm like, oh, let's do Making Angels again. But we would love your thoughts on that piece, and what inspired you to put it within that collection of works in the album.
That out. Well, I suppose it's a little easier to talk about the album first, and then the piece. So
Sure.
one of the things that I realize I value as a composer is for the pieces that I've already written to continue having a life. When I think about having the pieces having another life, one of the best ways for them to not just have a first performance and to sit in the drawer is to record them, because then people like yourselves can hear them and you might think, oh, I like those, I like that sound world. Maybe we'll play that piece, or maybe Katie could write us a piece, or what else has she got? So I guess it just promotes interest. And so the idea was for me to put a collection of pieces that I'd written together. And well, at the time, I'm quite a slow composer. I take my time. It doesn't just all come out. It's a very layered process, and maybe we'll get to talking about that later. But this particular piece was written for a New York ensemble where I met up with other young composers in 2001 in Italy, and I wrote it for that particular performance, and also as a test piece to put into a folio to get into a PhD, because I didn't think that I would get in. So that piece was part of my acceptance into the PhD program at the University of Melbourne. So it holds it's quite special to me, but really interesting for me is the chords in that piece. And I've taken those chords and used them in very many other pieces that I've written, and I can't get away from them. So in thinking about the album as a whole, I like to think of it as a narrative. So my problem was I didn't have that many works because I'm quite slow. And but the good thing was that I think they're quite aligned, and the album tells a story regardless. So I love that idea of mastering the music and deciding what order it's going to come in, and to think of it as not as a concept album, but as a album with a clear narrative.
Hearing you say that it resonates. I can understand. And programming is so important. When you're programming a recital, the order is important. And I would imagine that, the same is true for an album, that you want everything to flow into each other and have this connectivity.
Yeah, to take the listener on I don't want to say the word journey, but to take them through the pathway and the thread of your internal processes, I suppose. But the story behind the piece, I think is also interesting with 20 years or so on reflection, because I went in Italy. I went to see the Michelangelo sculptures, The Prisoners, and it sits next to the famous David. But I was really taken with these prisoners because they're blocks of marble with these gorgeous elbows and knees and masculine figures trying to break out of the marble. And I thought of Michelangelo creating them, and they're kind of like his angels. And at the time, I wasn't very aware of why I wrote music. I just knew that I did. And I was trying to say something, and I said it, but I couldn't articulate with words at that time in my life what I was trying to say musically. But over time, I've learned to do that. And I think the feeling for me at the time was from the point of view of Michelangelo, you know, that he's birthing these incredible sculptures, and he's able to somehow see something he created something out of nothing, I suppose. He had a beautiful block of marble to work with, and then he created something that looked like it was always meant to be there. So it was partly about trying to tap into what that vision is. And I love the idea of making something out of nothing. But I knew that I had a flute, a clarinet, and piano, and what could I do with those textures to create something out of nothing?
Katy, have you read the book The Agony and the Ecstasy? I can't remember who wrote it, but it's about Michelangelo. And my favorite part of the book is actually, I think it's like historical fiction. And there's one scene where it's exactly like he was working on that sculpture, because he's talking about having this big block of marble and how he would look for the marble to kind of speak to him and for the figure to come out of the marble versus him imposing a figure from that same material. So,
well, you just articulated it beautifully. And I think as a teenager or in my early 20s, I have read it. And maybe I drew upon that, who knows?
yeah,
So a long time ago, but it's possible.
yeah. Because when we were playing it and I was reading your description of your inspiration from it, that's what came to mind. And I just thought it was so cool because it's been probably 20, 30 years since I've read it too. So.
I just had the pleasure of listening through your newest project, Hidden Thoughts, and I was blown away. I loved it so much. It's so interesting. There's moments where it's so poignant and so heartbreaking, and there's moments that are really kind of humorous too. And your idea to base it on the thoughts of anonymous women, the hidden thoughts that they wouldn't tell people, is just really fascinating and really touching. So first I wanted to fangirl out a little bit and tell you how much I really loved it. But I really also wanted to hear you know, how that came about, what your process was like, what inspired you to write it, and what you learned through it.
Well, firstly, thank you for listening all the way through. That means a lot to me. This piece, I think, is the first piece of mine that's really encapsulated everything that I stand for. It's my heart on a sleeve. It's I had enough musical technique by the time I wrote it to write what I wanted to write. But I was also trying to work out how to marry. I didn't want to just write another piece. I mean, it's great being able to write pieces for a living. I mean, it's incredible. But I wanted to somehow incorporate who I am as a human into that in a way that was more obvious. So there's a lot of things in my previous music I think that I'm trying to say, and I can use music as a vehicle to say that. But unless I really spoke about the specific content of the piece, no one would know, and that's totally fine. So here I was racking my brains trying to think of a way to marry these two things. And when my twins were born in 2003, I was in a mothers group in Sydney, and I remember on the second meeting. Do you have mothers groups in the US?
Mhm.
So it was a group of women who'd all had babies in the same week, and we didn't know each other, and we came together and we met weekly, and it was incredible support because I was away from home. And one particular girl there, I remember she came to the group, and on the second week, the maternal and child health nurse said to us, "How's your week been?" And we went around the group and said, "Oh, I'm not sleeping and the breastfeeding's difficult," and whatever it happened to be. And she said, "I've been sad this week because I don't think my daughter likes me very much." And
Oh.
I thought to myself, who says that out aloud?
Uh,
While simultaneously my heart went out to her, but I thought she was incredibly brave for vocalizing that in what should be the happiest time of her life.
uh,
And for her anyway, it totally blew me away and it stuck with me. And she became one of my best friends. And um, and our children have, although they've grown up in separate states because I'm in Melbourne now, we've maintained our friendship, which I value greatly. So that was the beginning of Hidden Thoughts. As well as that, I had a very difficult marriage, and that ended around the time where I was starting to think about the Hidden Thoughts piece. And as well as that, there was a lot going on in Australia at the time about domestic violence. There'd been the Australian of the Year was a woman whose 11-year-old child had been killed by his father at a cricket ground in front of everybody, and so it was very high on the agenda in Australia, and there was a lot in the newspapers. And I started really thinking, we walk around the streets every day and we don't know what the person who we're walking by is thinking or what they've just been through, and maybe we could all just be a bit kinder. And somehow Hidden Thoughts grew out of that. So I thought, what if we knew what people were actually thinking when they go about their lives, and what if they felt that they could say that? So I developed a survey with Kaz Cook, who in Australia is a beautiful cartoonist and children's writer, and she's very big on women's and girls stuff, she calls it, but her cartoons are just gorgeous. I've said a lot of her words, one of them being, "We already know you have a bum crack. Display is unnecessary." And I set that to a Gregorian chant kind of scenario. It's very short, but it's fun. So that's where she comes from. She says things in cartoons and with words, and I say things with music. So I thought I worked with her to develop a survey, and we sent it out into the world, and I have some responses from the US as well, mostly from Australia, but from around the world. And I asked women, do you have hidden thoughts and feelings? Tell me what they are. What have you learned to be brave about? And what would you like to be braver about? And can you tell me anything about hidden thoughts and or courage? And I just had an outpouring of people typing into an anonymous Google document that landed in my inbox of just incredible, funny, poignant, gut-wrenching, confessional things. And one of the reasons I came to write a survey was because although I love setting words, and so for example the Kaz Cook bumcrack words, I just think that's fabulous, and I love doing that sort of thing and bringing humour into music. But I can't write words. I'm the world's worst at excuse me, at writing words, but I can set them. So I thought, well, what can I do where I don't have to commission someone? I know what to do with them when I see them. So how can I get them, but get them from that internal place? And I was thinking back to, I don't think my daughter likes me very much, as a hidden thought. And so it was born out of that. And as I was reading through and as I was choosing the words to write or to set, there were so many tears and so much laughter, and it was a very solo experience. But at the same time, I felt so connected to these women and felt that I had to honour what they'd given me.
It's interesting that you said you kind of thought about people passing you on the street and you have no idea that what they're thinking or what they've been through. I had that same image listening to your piece. Like, we go about our everyday lives and go to work and care for our families, and yet all of this deep experience is contained within each person. And so yeah, I just found it was really beautiful.
Yeah. And from a little germ of one experience almost 20 years ago, that's been sort of rotating in the back of your mind for that long. And then it flourishes into this beautiful piece that empowers women and allows them to express their feelings without judgment.
I had so many women, I think probably a quarter of I had over 200 responses, and at least a quarter of them at the end said, thank you for this opportunity to say these things. I've never said these to anyone. And somehow it made a difference to them. So I'm grateful to them that they could actually dig deep. And some of the text is so, you wouldn't think to say it, but somehow it came out in the written word. And I've done a second Hidden Thoughts now, and it's going to have its premiere very shortly online, where I used letters that had been suppressed. We can talk about that one if you're interested, but it was the same experience with the words in the letters, just thoughts that aren't necessarily mind-blowing, but when they're taken just out of context and just sat with or set to music, that they take on a deeper meaning, or they provide, they exacerbate the distance between the listener and the speaker. And somehow in that distance, there's also a connection. I'm talking off the top of my head here, trying to describe the feeling, but I hope that I can explain further if I need to.
Yeah,
Of
please.
course.
About that. Yeah. So you said the premiere is happening online, and did you conceive of this project like in tandem, or did it arise out of the first project?
It arose out of the first project. So I really, every piece for me just is what it is. But as I was writing Hidden Thoughts, I was having, setting words like this, I find it really easy and so much fun. And I thought, this is the most fun I've been having in a long time with music. What else can I do? So I started sort of looking out. And I remembered again, it's one tiny little memory of where this particular Hidden Thoughts comes from. It's called Return to Sender, or Hidden Thoughts to Return to Sender. And there's a human rights lawyer in Australia called Julian Burnside, and he works a lot with the asylum seekers on Nauru Island, which I'm not sure if that this news reaches the US, but we have an offshore detention centre in Australia, and people arriving by boat are sent there, and in the last few years they've just been stuck there. There's no mechanism for allowing them to come out of detention, and so there's a lot of hoo-ha and uproar in Australia about this, and Julian Burnside was working with some of these asylum seekers, and there's little children been on the island for 5 years. It's hideous. And he asked Australians to write letters to the asylum seekers, letters of encouragement and support. And 2,000 Australians wrote to the asylum seekers. And over 2 to 3 years, from 2013 to 2015, all these letters, 2,000 of them were sent to the island of Nauru, specifically addressed to an asylum seeker. And in 2015, which is what I remember, they all got sent back in one day to Julian Burnside, undelivered and unopened. And I had always meant to write a letter. It was always my intention to write one, and I never got around to it. And yet none of the letters were delivered to the asylum seekers. So I thought, well, these have been hidden. And I asked Julian for the letters, and he granted me access. So unfortunately, I was the one that opened them. And I got to read what Australians wanted to say to the asylum seekers. And so I finished this one in February this year, and it's another 1 hour work, and it only uses the text of the letters to the asylum seekers, and they're so, again, they're funny and poignant, and they're so beautiful and eclectic, and it was such a joy to set them. So that was meant to have its premiere in May at a festival in Australia, which of course has been cancelled, but there'll be an announcement made, I think, in the next couple of weeks about its online premiere.
We absolutely look forward to that. And what those two projects are parallel in so many ways, but I'm sure vastly different in others.
Musically, they're very different. Sarah, I think you would have noticed in Hidden Thoughts, with the women's Hidden Thoughts, there's a lot of, musically it's quite eclectic, and it's got spiky moments and very lyrical moments. The idea was that, there are 6 singers and six instruments, and the idea was not to have an ensemble of 6 backing a vocal ensemble. The idea was to have 12 soloists, and they all are beautiful soloists in their own right, but to work in duos, and a vocalist and a cello, or a piano and a vocalist, or a clarinet and the flute, and to work a lot with duo and doublings and textural forces there. Hidden Thoughts 2, Return to Sender, is for string quartet, narrator, and mezzo-soprano. So already it's different. There's a lot of drone and lyrical, sort of tribal feeling. I use harmonic singing in the voice, and the voice is just simply part of the ensemble. It's an ensemble of 6, not a voice narrator with string quartet backing. So in that way it's similar, but musically it's quite different. But still, writing an hour of music, that was my musical challenge, because I'd never done that before. So conceiving and structuring that, I think, was fascinating, and I'm really glad to have done that.
Katy,
An incredible undertaking, I'm sure. Oh, sorry, Erica.
No, it's okay. I had a follow-up question that popped in my mind as you're talking about these 2 projects. With the first one, did any of the people that sent in the thoughts to you, I know you said they were anonymous, right? But did you have a way to contact those people to let them know, here's my piece? Was there a way for you to share your work with the people that wrote those thoughts? And if so, have you gotten any feedback from them?
Oh, that's a good question. No, there's absolutely no way for me to contact them, because that was the only way that I could get the ethics approval to put the survey out. Sure. in the meantime. However, what I do know about them is what age group they fall into, what country they're from, and whether they live in a rural or urban area. And I could kind of pull out the 75-year-olds are saying different things to the 25-year-olds. So I could tell that. But in the ethics submission and in the document that they had to sign in order to proceed through to the survey, it said that they could keep an eye on my website. I've got a newsletter. So although the project's taken many years more than I was expecting, and it hasn't yet had a in-person premiere, I'm hoping that those people will be keeping an eye on performances and be able to hear it in some way, whether they've heard the podcast that Sarah's just heard, or when it comes to an actual premiere, that would be, I really hope that they can hear that. The people who have heard it, I'm sure some of them have written text, and that would be because it started off with my friends and family and then sort of snowballed out, and also my colleagues, and snowballed out that way. And there are a lot of themes represented. So although I could only use a small amount of the text that I was given, I tried to structure the piece. So, some of the themes are grief and loss, body image, sex, feeling trapped, and that was particular for the 35 to 55-year-old women. And so depending on how much people talked about that over the course of the 200 plus surveys, I tried to give that enough airtime in the, according to the percentage of what I was given structurally in the piece. So hopefully, even if people's thoughts aren't specifically found in the piece, that they'll resonate with the themes there.
That's fascinating. I just think that's neat. And my hope too for the second project would be that even though those people in the detention center didn't ever get those letters, you never know that they may someday get to hear your piece and then indirectly get to hear those letters that never, were allowed for them to see. So
That would be so amazing. That's what my hope was when I was writing. I was trying to compose it for them in case they hear it. And one of the things that I added into both Hidden Thoughts project is a way for the audience to participate in the performances. So for Hidden Thoughts women, anybody, male, female, when they come to the performance, they can submit their hidden thought into a box, and then those thoughts will be incorporated into that night's score. And I've designed the score in a way that can happen. So it's a bit of an improv thing. So it's something that's never been
So cool.
spoken before or said out loud will actually be heard by an audience. And with the asylum seekers' hidden thoughts, in the final movement, I was imagining that it would be an in-person premiere and rather than an online one, but I think there's a way to make it work. But the audience are invited to sing with the narrator actually to the asylum seekers. So their participation in it is just to sing this little, I don't know, it's chant-like. It's just a little phrase over and over while the vocalist and the string quartet sort of meander all around it. But they sing "We welcome you here," and that's the whole movement. And it's how the piece ends with the audience singing to the asylum seekers. So I'm hoping in some way they will hear it.
ah, that's beautiful.
That gave me bumps. Yeah.
Well, Katy, back to recording, we were talking about your recording that Making Angels was on. And in talking about that, it seems like you really do craft each recording in a sort of a unique way. I had never thought of a composer writing pieces specifically for a given recording that they're putting together. So I'd love to hear more about that. And then also along with that, do you write for specific musicians? It sounds like you might do that quite a bit. And if so, how do you go about deciding who you're going to write music for and that type of thing?
Usually, so I'm mostly writing for commission now. So often the ensemble or organisation will come to me, which is so nice. I can't believe that I can even say that out loud, but it's a beautiful thing. And so I always find myself writing for specific musicians or singers, and just like, as you well know, just like a singer has a particular voice and that's unique to them, of course so do the instrumentalists, and everyone brings I really love finding the human element of what that instrumentalist brings to their instrument and brings to the music. And so my number one question when we have decided to work together is, what are the bits in a score? And I would ask you this, Erica, for example. When you're in a score, there's always a bit, I'm sure, that you look forward to playing, that you go, oh, we're coming up to those couple of bars. I love those couple of bars. And I always ask my instrumentalists, what are those? What are they for you? And then I try and write the essence of what those things are for them. So even though the piece might be played by another ensemble another time, that instrumentalist knows that it's been written specifically for them. And it often informs the way that the piece will go as well, because sometimes there's things that I haven't thought of before. And with Hidden Thoughts, with the 12 musicians, I did that for every single one of them, and every one of them gets some sort of solo or virtuosic or lush aspect to their moment in the work. And so it's very important to me that their hidden you know, maybe it's something that they've never articulated before, what they love or what makes them zing when they get to particular moments in a score. And I wanted that to come through in the music as well. So I love writing for specific people because I want to write for the person behind the instrument as well as the instrument, because everyone has different things that they love to do with their instrument. With Hidden Thoughts, I had the two ensembles, the Song Company in Sydney and Syzygy Ensemble in Melbourne. I'd worked extensively with all of them, and it was 6 and 6, and I thought, oh, that's a beautiful match, which of course from a practical perspective is a terrible match, Melbourne and Sydney, and it's been so difficult trying to get the premiere. But anyway, that's but musically and also from the way that they think about music and play music is very similar. So that was a lovely thing to do. And I think in terms of recording, I don't actually write specifically for recordings. So maybe I might write a piece just to fill in a recording if there's if I could round it out. But it's been more a lucky break that the music happens to sit quite well together. So I've done a chamber disc, 2 vocal discs, or a choral and a vocal and a brass. And it's my hope one day I can do orchestral or Hidden Thoughts or something like that with larger forces.
One of the things that I love to ask people is what has been the biggest surprise that they've encountered in their career. And maybe I like that because when I started, I had like this very set idea, of how it was going to go.
Can you tell me about that?
Sorry?
Can you tell me about that?
Oh, sure. I mean, I went to music school, and so I thought that I would take the auditions and kind of take a very traditional path as a flutist. And I found myself teaching. I found myself in administration. We do chamber music. And so it's been a surprise all along the way. And so I was just curious, what are some of the surprises that you've encountered? I know we've touched on it a little bit, but if there's one that's...
Yeah. I suppose, look, the whole thing's been a surprise, to be honest. I mean, I was the kid that stared out the window. I got married really young. I had no drive for anything in particular. I was just quite happy with the world. So it's a surprise to me that there was this musicality that I didn't really know about that ended up coming out a little later in my life rather than earlier. And it's so delightful because I didn't know that about myself. So the biggest surprise, I suppose, is the way that music has allowed me to learn about myself. And it's helped unlock me in a way. Like I felt the longer that my career has gone on and how it's kind of blossomed slowly has also been the blossoming of me as a human and me feeling comfortable in my own skin and as a woman and as a mother and being brave enough or courageous enough to put myself out there and offer pieces to the world. And I suppose that's the vulnerable side. I didn't know a lot of that. And I've learned to like myself through my work. It's a bit of a symbiotic relationship, I suppose. That's not a very specific example, is it? It's not a musical one as such.
No, that's really beautiful.
It is. It's so beautiful and eloquently stated, and it is everything.
All right, let's stick with that then.
Yeah, that's really beautiful.
I feel like I'm bumbling around, and it often takes me a long time. I often have the essence of something that I know I'm trying to express, and I can express it musically before I can express it with words. So if you'd asked me these questions about Hidden Thoughts 3 or 4 years ago, there's no way that I could have spoken about it. But because I've sat with it and I've been forced to write about it for grant applications and through my university work and teaching, I've learned how to find the words. So I often feel like I'm bumbling around trying to grab the essence of the feeling that I have in order to articulate it, but I'm slowly getting there.
I think you're articulating everything beautifully.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Agreed. Agreed. So, what advice would you give younger musicians?
Oh, I just love that you said younger musicians rather than female musicians. Um, I just think everyone's human, and I teach younger male and female composers, and they all struggle with the same kinds of things. So thank you for that. Thank you for that question. There's something about learning to be comfortable with being uncomfortable and being able to sit in being uncomfortable. And if anyone's watching this and they know me, they'll go, oh, Katie's going on about that again. But I think it's really important because when we're uncomfortable with what's going on, like if we get stuck in writing a piece or stuck in a score that is a bit scary if you're playing it, I think it can stop the process. But if we can recognize it, or we sort of jump to the first solution that we find, and that's a John Cleese thought that I've taken from a lecture. John Cleese of Monty Python, and he says often when we're uncomfortable, we jump to the first solution, not because it's the best solution, but because it relieves that feeling of being uncomfortable. But if we can sit with that a little longer, we can often come up with 4 or 5 solutions, and one of them might be better than the first one. And so to come up with a better musical solution because we're okay with ourselves and we can acknowledge what's going on, that it's hard to write music and you get stuck and you fall into a hole and you need to find your way out, that's normal and it's okay, then I think there's a greater chance of writing music that's satisfying to you.
And what you just stated can not only be applied to music, but life in general.
Yeah.
Yes.
I see that's what I used to struggle with, and a lot of my students struggle with that. They think that falling in the hole is something about them, that they need to recognize it's just part of that creative process. And it's like, oh, here's the hole. What does it look like? How will I get out of it? Rather than panicking that they're in the hole in the first place.
Right.
I'm sure we all experienced that.
Indeed. Because I could sit and talk with you for 4 days, but everybody has other things to do. So we're going to transition to the grab bag portion of the interview. We're going to start with a quick round of this or that. So these are not music related. This is just for us to get to know you a little bit better as a human being. Okay.
So you say this or that, and I just say which one. Is that right?
Yes. So the first, this or that, sweet breakfast or savory breakfast?
Savory breakfast.
Same.
Okay.
In fact, I have dinner for breakfast.
Oh, all the time. That's the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the best.
What
Do you
about
do
you,
that too, Erica?
What?
What
Do you
about
do that too?
Yeah, I'm savory breakfast, and I'll eat breakfast for every meal. Like, I would just eat breakfast all the time.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Sarah, what about you?
I do sweet breakfast, but for dinner. So I do it backwards. It's better to have them at dinner time than in the morning. Yeah. Okay, the next one is sunrises or sunsets?
Sunsets.
Okay.
Very interesting. And how about indoors? Are you indoorsy or outdoorsy?
Indoorsy. But I love nature. So if I could be indoors looking at nature, that would be the best.
That's good. Combinations are definitely allowed.
They are. Correct.
Okay, so now this is the grab bag. So we have 3 more questions that are moderately non-musical. So answer at free will. And I think, Erica, you're up first.
I am. So do you have a hobby? And what do you like about that hobby?
Oh, one of my hobbies is to help my friends who are starting businesses think through their businesses. And I don't know why I love this. I love doing this. I love helping people dig in why they want to do what they do. Why are they doing what they're doing? And I'm always coming up with business ideas. That's my hobby.
That's really cool.
That is so cool. Yeah. You can come help me anytime.
Love to help you.
Okay, the next one is there a non-classical music genre that you gravitate toward or that you really enjoy?
Well, this just standard top 40 pop is enforced upon me in my house of three teenage boys. So actually, I've got to say, silence is my number one thing that I gravitate towards. Just silence. And I know that's not a very... I've come to accept that about myself, that that's okay, because with such questions I feel pressure to grab something else. But actually, silence would be my number one. I love it. It's nourishing and I love it. But folk music, maybe.
Actually, I love that question or your answer, because silence, it feels like such a premium these days. You don't get a lot of it. So that's a really insightful answer.
Okay, last one. What is your favorite podcast?
Oh, I think On Being with Krista Tippett, which is a US-based podcast. And I'm quite into the Brene Brown one at the moment. It's called Unlocking Us. But Krista Tippett has some really interesting guests on, and I've found quite a few people that I now follow because I just think they're so incredibly interesting not musical, but I've taken a lot of what they say and try and incorporate into my own musical practice.
Oh, Katy, it was so wonderful to have you with us. Thank you for being amazing and inspiring, and we so look forward to the premiere of your second work. Please let us know when it will be online for viewing, and I can't wait.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun. You guys are fantastic.
Thanks. We'll see you soon and talk soon.